Silver Society.
Welcome to the Silver Eye Society podcast, the podcast where we look at film to find the ancient themes behind our modern issues. This movie that we're going to cover, I'm not sure if it has a modern issue per se. I think if you find yourself facing the issue that this movie places its characters in, you may be transcending both the modern and ancient problems people face. That movie is Cube, the 1997 film. Some may love it, others may hate it, but it is inimitable, shall we say. Cube, I don't know what to say about Cube, but we're going to do a whole episode on Cube. We're going to talk about whether life is just a cube, man, and the whole point of the movie is that life sucks and then you die. Talk about that cheery perspective. We'll also talk about tyrannical leaders. It's actually something that Cube does a good job of illustrating the role of a leader and how that can devolve into tyranny and then what happens. And we'll sum it up with whether whether Cube is actually trad propaganda. Trude, I call it. Now, and we'll talk about how the Generation X is lame and all this. All that good stuff about the modern world's failures. So let's go to this podcast's failure, the word of the podcast.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell all the viewers something. That if you tried to live in Cube, like you live through your slow introductions to episodes, you would be left in the second room of Cube while everyone else had went ahead and gone through the Cube.
Hey,
you understand?
But guess what?
What?
Spoilers. If I got left in the second room of Cube, kind of would have been a good thing, though, wouldn't it? I would have been ahead of the curb, ahead of the cube, as they may say. Also, listen, doesn't Lex Friedman do like 1 hour long soliloquy introductions to every podcast? Like,
yeah, I skipped them. And to be honest, Lex Friedman wouldn't survive the Cube either. He's a nice person. I like him, but I don't think Lex Friedman would make it through the Cube. We're about to get hardcore. Before we get hardcore, we're going to do hardcore etymology. Silence.
Lex Friedman.
I am the tyrannical leader.
We need to discuss whether Lex Friedman would survive the Cube. I think Lex Friedman would survive the Cube because first of all, he'd be like, immediately he would have gotten probably how the Cube was designed, and then he'd be able to like pull part of the Cube off and make like an AI and send it into the rooms to like Lex Friedman will be exactly the person I would want to be stuck in the Cube with. You know what I'm saying? You, I don't know. You, I'm not so sure. You would devolve into the tyrannical leader. You'd be the one that everybody immediately is like, watch him. Let's see how that goes.
Right. But I like this movie, I would actually be the one walking out of the Cube. So anyway.
The one that walks out of the Cube is the handicap character.
However, it's got to be done.
Interpret that as you like, if that's you're the one that walks out of the Cube.
Listen, you and Lex Friedman can hang out in the Cube and do extremely long monologues that everyone skips, if that's what you are into. But I'm just trying to say... Look, like I said, I like Lex Friedman sometimes. You know, I watch it occasionally. It's a little milk toasty, to be honest with you. It's a little milk toast. I'm not sure milk toast makes it through the Cube. In fact, that's my slogan. What I would do to rally people to my side in the Cube is I would make up slogans like that. Milk toast don't make it through the Cube.
That's
I would come up with shit like that.
Soviet.
And I would, and then I would proclaim it, and I would say, "Who will follow me?" And some would, and some wouldn't. And then we would see. The Cube decides. That's another one I would say. The Cube decides, and I would bang my fist on the side of the wall. I just did it here. You told me not to do that. And Do you see who wins in the end in the Cube?
No one
So
wins.
word of the podcast. Word of the podcast is Cube.
Oh, wow. I'm shocked. Shocked and bewildered.
A regular geometric body with 6 square faces. Also, the product obtained by... I won't even bother with the math because that's above your head. This was the fun trivia, though. From the Greek kybos, a 6-sided die, used metaphorically of dice like blocks of any sort. Also, cake piece of salted fish. Uncertain origin. Now, are you ready? The mathematical also was in the ancient Greek word. The Greeks threw with 3 dice. Did you know that? Greeks used to gamble with 3 dice. That's how they played the games. The highest possible roll was what? Let's check some math real quick. If you roll 3 dice, what's your highest possible roll?
Like 18.
What are the 3 numbers that would you get?
If you
to do
add
that?
them,
You're
like
correct.
6.
Just,
6.
what is it? Say it.
6?
666.
Oh.
New World Order? Maybe. We don't know. Anyway, moving on. So, the Greeks threw with 3 dice. The highest possible roll. I said that already. Blah, blah. Here's the thing also I would say, okay? If I was in the cube. I'd say, hey, people, because I don't use the word folks. I don't like that. That's something that people came up with like since 2010 or so. Everyone calls everyone folks. I don't like it. That's another thing Lex Friedman does. I don't like. He calls people folks. That's
true.
That's a hint that
you're
in the mainstream. When you're a person on a podcast and you call people folks, I'm sorry. Again, I like him, nice guy, but
we'll have
maybe
him
not
on the
making it to the cube.
podcast. Maybe.
Sure.
Maybe. He has
1960s slang sense. Listen, Cube. The 1960s slang sense of extremely conventional person is from the notion. Think about, see if you can figure that one out.
A square.
Genius.
They called him a square.
Right,
Yeah.
but if you're a cube, you're like a super square.
Yeah. Cube also sounds like rube, like you're a rube.
Does.
A little bit.
Which sounds like Rubik's Cube. So have we...
Oh my God.
I know.
Overwhelming.
Get ready, viewers. This is the fun. The people, they tolerate your introduction just to get to this part, to get to the word of the podcast. All right, and so
I'm
that's
the
great.
Lex Friedman of the podcast. The Lex Friedman.
We'll
intro.
work together.
Hey, whatever. That's like we're weeding out the weak. Okay? Do you think we want to just give away all this kind of like inner workings of the universe and deep knowledge to people that were like, fine, I'll watch 30 seconds? No. If you can't sit through a slow monologue of a few minutes, then you don't deserve to know how the Greeks gambled or what the slang term for a boring person was. Like, you don't deserve all this depth of knowledge.
I agree.
I'm the bouncer of the podcast. Okay.
In your own way.
Life is just a cube, man. Here's what I thought. When I was watching this movie, which, okay, briefly, the movie's really bad and also really good. It's both. It can be both.
It's like this podcast.
That's exactly right. We are the cube of podcasts. That's saying a lot.
Which is not good, by the way, because I tried to find some merch, some cube merch, because I got real into the cube for about 24 hours after I watched it. I was like, I want to represent the cube. I don't ever see anyone with a T-shirt with the Cube movie on it. I was like, that's fucking awesome. Let me go find it. You can't find it.
You gotta make it. We gotta make it.
Well, I don't think you can
Business
just make it. I don't
opportunity.
think you're allowed.
Yes, you can. You can do anything. Laws of man do not apply to the minds of gods, okay? You're living in Earth point 1 or whatever. Oh, fuck, I always fuck it up. Earth point 1. I'm in Web
That now
3.0.
you have the spirit.
That's right. I have the spirit of the cube within me. So listen.
That's right.
The Cube is a very badly acted movie. And look, the problem also isn't just the actors. They may have had no choice. I don't think there was any way to act out the writing. The writing is not good. It's the characters are not fully formed. It's almost as if the characters are all pieces of some one person's personality, which if you did take out a sliver of your personality, like the introverted version of you or the neurotic version of you, it'd be this really one-dimensional, kind of annoying person, because it would be...
See, that's why I think people really are a lot of times. I don't think it's that off. Do you really think it's that off? I think a lot of people are kind of like those people in the cube.
Yeah, that's kind of scary. That's scarier than the cube.
Not everybody. I'm not bringing everybody down. I'm trying to bring down humanity using the cube as a cudgel of cultural weaponry. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying that,
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. That's true.
Plus, do you want to be stuck in the cube with multidimensional people? I'm not sure. You kind of want the hardcore people in the cube.
Yeah. The cube is, oh my goodness, it's so much. There's so much. There's so much in the cube. Okay, so, it's your decision if you shall take on what it means to watch the movie Cube. I found it actually helpful to look away from the movie sometimes and just listen to the dialogue. Like, that's actually going to help you at times to really, like, pay attention to what's going on and not get sucked in by how bad the acting is and how bad some of the design is. There are some 90s moments in this film that are worth watching in the sense of, like, art film archaeology dig. Like, there's some excellent maneuvers where they're like sleeping. They're just sleeping. And they do this thing where the camera's like just like it's a still frame.
And they have
being
the track, the music that is just like some guy going. It's really,
man.
It's fun. It's one of those movies that
is
one of the most
stuff,
damning.
though.
That is a damning review. What you just said. Whenever you can say about a movie, it helps to sometimes look away. That's not good. There's a problem with the way it all came together. But you know what? It really was a low budget, independent kind of movie. So for that, I will give them set design wise. I think it actually comes together well. Like
they
had a plan.
Yeah. Look,
I
it's
think
worth
that comes
watching.
together well.
It's worth watching. I don't regret having watched it. I don't regret having watched it. And there's something also about like movies like this. I always appreciate low budget and like 90s stuff because they were working with what they had. Like they didn't have all these tools to bypass and to create limitless creations. Like I like seeing how people deal with limits in a creative respect. Like I actually enjoy that. You go back to the movies like what's the one with the guy that has all the nails in his head? Hellraiser, right? One of these?
Hellraiser.
So there's many of these movies. I can't remember which one, but there's a scene in one of them where blood comes out of the floor as if it's seeping out of the floor, but the shot is actually just the reverse of like blood being dropped on the floor or something. Like it's just in reverse. That's how they did that scene. Right. And of course, as soon as you see it, you're like, that's not it. But like, that's not the point. Like, the point is not that we've become so lazy as viewers that it's like, I can tell that's fake. Did you not know it was not fake, that blood was coming out of the floor? Like, what is more interesting is like, how did you do that? How did you think as an artist to create that shot in the real world, like using limited tools? That's creativity. And not that, CGI isn't creativity per se, but it sure is easier to, create things that aren't real that way. So I always appreciate this kind of thing. Now let's circle back, whatever. Watch The Cube, watch it. It's crazy, it's bad. Don't judge us is all I want people to understand. Don't have them, I don't want them to watch the movie and be like, wow, these people really like garbage. We're going to talk about some of the themes that you see play out in The Cube and why it's interesting. So
eventually we're going to talk about that.
I'm going to try to start it now. Life is just a cube is the first thing that came to me because it was like you have all these people and they're kind of like confused. Why am I here? Which is like, isn't that the existential question of life? Why am I here? Why am I in this trap? Why am I suffering? How do I get out? The only way out, you find, is death. Essentially, death is the constant. Suffering is the constant. And the release for all of them, except one, is death. So there's a little bit of like a parallel to a dark view of life. Like The Cube is just life. We're all just these lost souls showing up in a place that we don't know how we got there, trying to figure out where to go, going in circles, suffering, experiencing loss, and then only kind of figuring it out right at the end, and then it's too late anyway.
See, this is why you cannot be the leader of the Cube team, and this is why you're all losers. Here's the problem. I ran a poll using social media because I'm a social media expert, as everyone fucking knows on this channel.
Yeah.
I ran a poll. I said, who would survive the Cube? Myself, Salome Siboney, or no one survives the Cube? And the overwhelming response was that no one survives the Cube, just like you're saying. And I'm saying, I don't want any of you in the Cube with me. If I got to be in the Cube, I want winners. I want winners that are moving through the Cube, that are willing to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. And the greater good is my survival through the Cube. But it's also their potential survival through the Cube. That's what I'm trying to say. Enough of this existential drama. Enough of this. Jean-Paul Sartre would never have made it out of the Cube.
No, he wouldn't.
Soren Kierkegaard, he would never make it out of the Cube.
Yeah, I guess not. Would Nietzsche?
Name another depressed existentialist. Who?
Would Nietzsche make it out of the Cube? We gotta know.
We do know.
He wouldn't.
He would totally. Here's the thing. Don't end up in the Cube to begin with. Don't imprison yourself into the Cube to begin with. Do you understand?
Okay, now you're the one saying psychobabble.
But it's this psychobabble which will bring you through the Cube.
I think that you're the tyrannical leader that is questionable and actually thwarts the overall success of the mission that is escaping the Cube. So,
But I'm not devoted to tyranny for tyranny's sake. See, that's
he
the
wasn't
difference.
either. He wasn't either. Only until the end. Okay, that's the problem here. That's why Cube is such a great example of like the life cycle of a tyrannical leader is what I thought. Because at the first, okay, so you have this one character. And the character is basically like this tough guy, take charge, command, dominate, lead, rule by force, quite literally by force, because he can beat everyone up. So he takes this role of leader. And at first, it actually works. It serves to bring cohesion and to create a unified group. Because at first, everybody shows up and they're kind of like, what are you doing? Like, who's here? Are you with me? Like, I don't want to do anything. Is the one guy, like, he's able to round everybody up and get them all working together to move forward. And when people try to, like, push, against it or, like, kind of do their own thing, he keeps everything in order. So at first, he serves a really crucial role in moving the group forward. But you watch how he starts to overstep that, become tyrannical, become maniacal and unstable. And then it's so amazing to watch that pattern play out, how the group then starts to identify him as a threat to their own survival and conspire against him and ultimately, at least for a time, overthrow him and move on without him. So
not until he kills the woman for no reason by dropping her off the side of the Cube. Actually, everybody, even though he had already kind of beaten people up and been a tyrant pretty badly, people were still kind of on Team Tyrant for a while until they realized, oh, he just murdered somebody.
Yeah.
And there was no reason, if I recall, for him to murder her.
It was ego. Because she had insulted
That's not the
him.
way to get to the Cube.
No.
I agree.
No,
I am not
wasted
suggesting.
a life. Like, in the Cube, it would have been smarter to just be like, I'm going to push her into the trap room, whatever. That would be the way. That was a complete waste. But that's also like something you see, right, in certain type of tyrannical leaders where the execution of perceived enemies becomes so personal and so egregious that it undermines respect, but like not even just respect. It's like there's no more fear even of the leader. It's not that kind of like, this guy is a little bit like, he's tough and he's violent, let's not. It starts to become like, this person's out of control. And like when you start to see that, it actually is an indication of instability and incompetence in the leader, because it's like you're willing to risk, the common goal of moving forward and progress and even your own like benefit at that point. It doesn't even benefit him besides just a personal grievance to kill her like that. So of
Well,
course
he's
they
losing his
conspire.
mind.
Yeah, he is also.
I agree. Look, I just want to make it very clear that I'm not supporting that type of tyranny in this podcast. In fact, in my notes, I made the suggestion that I thought that people like that must be put down. Is that a call to violence on YouTube? I'm not sure.
Kinda, but it's okay.
Well, say it's not. I mean, non-violently put down. Isolated in the cube room, a safe cube room.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
anyway, so I'm not suggesting that is a good idea. I'm suggesting, number one, it's not psychobabble, don't end up in the cube in the first place. You know, when we cover Cube 2, Hypercube, which does exist, by the way.
Oh my God, are you serious?
Oh, yes. There is a sequel, and I haven't watched it. And there is another
That's
prequel.
not right.
So I think we make this a series. Spring break, Cube watching marathon.
Oh my God.
Maybe we'll understand why these people ended up in the cube. But I'm just saying, and you know, because we're always trying to bring modern solutions to ancient problems or something like that. What is it again?
What is it that you're so on about not getting in the cube? Okay, like let it
Don't
go.
get
You've
in the
been
cube in
telling
the first
This
place.
is not even in our notes. Like I don't know what you're
It
so
is.
against. These people didn't put themselves in the cube. First of all, none of them. They're just sleeping and shit, and they got dropped into the cube. What are you?
They're
talking
responsible. You said the first part of the notes is life is just a death cube, man. That's your
Yeah.
first part of the thing. And
You're
I'm
born.
saying
You didn't have a choice to be born. That's the thing.
you're not born in the cube necessarily, though. Do you understand?
the
I'm not
cube
going to press the
isn't-
point. If all you motherfuckers just go live in the cube, then good luck. I can move on.
If you
What's
have
the
advice
next
how to
thing?
stay out of the cube, then by all means. But if not, we can go to your other point, which is don't let dumb fascists lead you, or at least demand that your fascists
That is what I wrote. I think I said kill them in their sleep, actually. That's what I wrote.
Because they were sleeping. When
Not
I saw
sure.
the sleeping scene, I was
Okay.
like, oh, okay, that's why he was so graphic. He's referencing the scene.
Yeah, because there is an aspect to this movie which is that, and it's decent. They don't have any materials to wage violence upon one another, which is actually. I'm just freestyling through all this. Let's make this a Second Amendment pro Second Amendment movie. so the Tyrant in the cube is the biggest, physically strongest monster, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Put a bunch of guns in the cube, and now we have a different scenario. You got even the severely autistic guy
Yeah, you do
could
have a different scenario.
potentially wage war and succeed. You know what I'm saying? So look,
You're not wrong. Is the problem? I guess like with this insane.
I'm not wrong is the name of
Fill
my podcast.
the cube rooms with guns and make it a real fair fight. But that's actually a really interesting point, right? Is that people aren't equal. Okay, so as much as we want to be like, well, society makes us equal, no, guns do. Sorry, like kind of. You know, like in that situation, there is no like, when physical force is not restrained by anything else. Now, of course, we have laws to restrain physical force. You're not supposed to use physical force upon people. But what if nothing actually stops you? What is a law but weaponry behind words? That's why laws are respected, because there's going to be a punishment behind that. So it's like...
Right, it's after the fact anyway.
After the fact...
In other words,
Oh,
real sociopaths in society don't... I mean, I'm sure that they're logical and they think about the consequences, but those people
They still
do violence regardless of the thing.
Yeah, because a lot of it's opportunistic also, you know?
Sure, and there's another aspect to this, because it is the biggest part of the movie, which is this leader who is a tyrant, and you're correct. So anyway, the point is that they don't have any tools within the cube. And that's why then this physically stronger person is able to dominate them. Now, the only other thing they have, besides my solution, which is throw weapons into the cube, is they're able to team up against him in the end. Yeah. So that's how they basically get on the other side of that equation.
Yeah, there's it's really interesting. One of the things I ended up seeing this movie as was, and it's maybe a better way to see these characters since they're kind of underdeveloped, is you see them as the representation of some kind of quality. So the girl is intelligence. That's actually her quality. That's what makes her useful. That's why it's also like a major overstep when the tyrannical leader starts threatening the girl, because it's like, okay, he's no longer even concerned with a sensical goal if he's willing to threaten the one person that really has the key to getting out of the problem. And so you see this, like, These qualities are like elements of society too. So you have force and power essentially, but then you have intelligence, then you have cooperation, and you even have compassion, right? Like, so the doctor is like this kind of like compassionate figure, like, no, we're all gonna go together. She, at first I was like, oh, like, this, how are they still risking their lives to bring through the like super handicapped character that could easily kill them all because of one small mistake. He's like out of, like, not totally in control of his body and whatever. But he ends up having this unknown, incredible knowledge, which is kind of a trope, but whatever, fine. The concept there is that, like, there's something good about that idea of being compassionate and bringing everyone along, because you don't actually know what everyone has to offer. And so by her bringing him along, they're able to use him later to get out. He's the one that has like a key piece of knowledge that allows them to essentially like try to escape the cube. So there's that.
Correct. So now, bring it back to Tsarist Russia, because you know I've been reading a book on Lenin recently, and now I moved on to a book on Stalin. By the way, the guy who wrote the book on Stalin was a guest on the Lex Friedman podcast, which is how I learned about it. So you know what? Despite all of my anger towards Lex Friedman, it's not real. But you know what? He helped me find this book. Yeah. So Tsarist Russia had a problem, and it's and this is going to be very brief. The autocracy, the power center based around the Tsar, needed to modernize the country. And to do this, they needed students. They needed intellectuals. They needed people to go to universities to learn things they needed them to be the math nerd in the Cube movie, right? Because they were going to get beaten by modernizing nations, Japan to their east and the countries of Western Europe over here, if they didn't do that. The problem was this dynamic between the students, the university students, who actually became some of the most radicalized people that led to the revolution that toppled the Tsar. The balance of power between this centralized autocratic force that was always, it was just a very bad relationship. They were trying to encourage the students to exist, but then they were also not allowing them almost any freedom whatsoever in order to get some of these ideas out to liberalize and modernize the nation. And then briefly, I just want to, as a point of trivia, Stalin was actually in I did not know this, was a student in an Orthodox seminary. He was basically studying to be a religious figure in the country of Georgia during all of this, and he gets kicked out. But anyway, that's for another episode. My point is about Cube. Look, this is what we do here. I bring Stalin, I bring Lex Friedman, I bring the Cube. I bring it all together for you people.
Okay, so here's the thing. This is why I bring this up. The Cube is civilization. The Cube is life. The Cube is civilization. The Cube is Sisyphus's boulder. The Cube is everything and anything. But you actually can watch the dynamics in this movie, and this is the best. I think this is the best thing about this movie, is that it does stay true to certain dynamics of power between human beings and in groups that transcends the dialogue. Like, they try to do a lot of philosophical stuff in there, but like, what's really great about this movie is watching a group of 5 people or something, watching the power dynamics play out and understanding that that is the same dynamic that plays out across an entire society. So you have the one person subjugating the 4 other people. You can also have the one ruler playing out the same pattern of subjugation to an entire nation. It is identical. So
and in Cube 3, Beyond Hypercube, we learn that it's Dr. Fauci who designed the cube.
It all comes together.
It all comes together.
And the CDC recommends that you spend at least 8 hours in the cube.
You're locked down in the cube.
You're locked down in the cube. Okay. So there's one little point I'd like to make, though, about I really think that the biggest interesting part about this movie is the power dynamics and the tyrannical leader type. But you wrote a note where the part of the reason you hate this character is because at one point they're like, how are we going to know that we're only sleeping for an hour, or they don't have clocks or anything? And he says, an hour is as long as I say. That's
the ultimate.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate expression of arbitrary power.
Yes.
And that's when they needed to kill him in his sleep. That's what needed to happen. And what? And I say that. Okay. Look, look. This is a movie. We're talking about a movie.
Yeah,
it's a fictional movie. I endorse killing that character in his sleep in the fictional movie. Because that's the only time you can, because they don't have Second Amendment rights in the cube. There are no Second Amendment rights in the cube, so that's the only choice. Yeah. And they show you how to do it. The main tool that you have in the cube is the shoelaces and the boots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very interesting
little dark.
Yeah, the little touch of Orwell in there, right? Like the boot stamping on the human face forever quote. Like this leader, right? It's this tyrannical leader figure is using this boot to beat the shit out of one of the guys in the cube that like can't fight back. And so let's move on to that character then, because this character's
I'm saying he should have fought back, and he should have fought back by killing him in his sleep with shoelaces.
Exactly. So he
which reminded me briefly, again, putting a lot of things together just like Kazan does. Kazan is the name of the severely autistic character in the film. If you watch war footage, which I do, recently, and if you see captured soldiers, you'll notice they don't have boot laces a lot of times. Because they take those out so that they don't use them to kill themselves or kill other people.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Some war footage recently of the Russian-Ukrainian thing. I noticed they showed like a bunch of soldiers sitting in a church. They were captured. I forget. It must have been Russian soldiers, because you never actually see any Russian media, so you would never see that. Yeah. So, and I noticed. I looked at it, I was like, something's off. And I looked at their shoes, and none of them had shoelaces in their boots anymore. And then I realized, they would, of course, take those out.
Oh, that's weird.
Speculation. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Maybe it's aesthetic. It's a style for soldiers.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Okay, so briefly, there's one also point that I this figure made me think of, which is like the dominance hierarchy and chimps and that whole idea. Because there's this, like, I ended up reading a little bit more about this last night because I wanted to look into more about like chimp behavior, and chimps are actually like remarkably violent of a species, like more so than other primate species. Like I think they are the most violent, and they even wage war between groups. So they're like incredibly, like they use violence like as a tool. It's very interesting because, you know, they're our closest ancestor, I believe. Like it's chimps specifically, or whatever, not ancestor, but you know, our link or whatever, the animal species shit. And they are one of the most violent species amongst themselves. So it's like, well, keep that in mind as we, you know, judge humanity and try to set reasonable goals for what society should look like. It may be already incredibly, you know, of an incredible achievement that we have obtained, considering our distant monkey cousins love to beat each other up. So here's the thing.
I don't think they're monkeys. Chimpanzees are not
whatever.
monkeys.
I'm using monkeys as a slur. It's a slur against them.
Well,
monkeys.
You're slurring chimpanzees by calling them monkeys, which is probably true. Yeah. Are they monkeys?
Let's
they're
not
not apes.
I don't even know what monkeys are.
Well,
monkeys are
I
like a
don't want to
colloquial
misinform
term.
people.
Monkeys is just like the monkeys, monkey. You know, like
That's
it's not a
right.
species.
Follow the science. Go on.
Follow the science. So anyway, you see that dynamic play out of like, supposedly, I haven't watched them, but supposedly what chimps do is if there is a chimp leader that is too brutal and too violent, the other chimps conspire against that leader. And that kind of conspiring actually goes on the whole time. Like, but the overthrowing has to be like instigated by the leader being too violent. But there's always this faction of chimps within a chimp group that is conspiring against the alpha chimp to take, you know, that chimp's place. And
But I think that's also if that chimp is getting old and weak, right?
well, that's possibly when they probably try it. Not the
Right.
one that I'm talking about, though, that's related to this. This is when a chimp becomes too like out of control as a leader, like too violent or something. That they supposedly lose the place because other chimps then do rise up, and it makes sense because it's the same thing you see play out in this movie, which is a certain level of aggression and dominance is necessary to keep a group cohesive and to be the leader, but too much of it only endangers the group. So it would make sense that the group would then rise up against that. But one of the really interesting things that I think that I want to finish up and talk about this, like just briefly put that out and then go on to talking about that one character that's like a nihilist and whatever. So you have, this is so interesting to me. You have the female, like the smart girl that's left in the end. You have this kind of like young guy that's disaffected, but he's kind of like cooperating with the girl and like trying to cooperate with the group. He's just going along. He's doing whatever is asked of him. And then you have this like violent leader figure. Because of the violence, the cooperative figure and the intelligent figure are thwarted. So it's like such a perfect recipe for what ruins a civilization. You have, they were going to escape, like they were actually making it. Through intelligence and through cooperation, they were going to get out of the cube. But at the very end, it's violence that thwarts them from being able to escape. They should have killed the guy legitimately. Like they kind of forgot about him, which fair enough. They're like starving and delusional at that point. But he was able to come back and get them right at the end. So the only one that gets out is...
Foolishness. Under my reign in the cube, that never would have happened, by the way. Like, that's not how you do it. Once the decision is made to overthrow the leader, you must act decisively. And not because they had him. They had him stuck in the cube door. And and Worth, and this is a good transition into our final point.
Yes.
Worth didn't have the capacity to end to do what he needed to do. He ran and he failed and he died because of it.
Yeah. And
once again, suggesting I don't want to lead anyone through the cube. Don't go into the cube to begin with. I'm just saying, within the film's dynamics, we must correctly study the tactics used to survive the cube.
Yeah, you should know how to survive the cube because the cube is civilization. The cube is life. It blew my mind. It blew my mind, right? Because that's the ever-present question is like, despite our intelligence, despite our ability to build these massive civilizations, the ever-present fear of what will destroy humanity is ultimately our violence. Like, will we, and right now, that's the thing, like, is there going to be a nuclear war, whatever? That's always the thing that seems to loom as an ever-present possibility for destroying at least a single civilization, and in some cases, the actual human species, is our capacity, our proclivity for violence.
But this is a great transition to the final point, which is there is a second alternative of doom, and that is the Worth route. Or let's say that moment at the beginning of the movie, which, remember, the tyrannical leader actually doesn't act tyrannical at all towards the beginning. He acts very nice. He's like, here, come on, we're going to do the thing. We're going to move. He actually helps the person stand up and start to move and start to do things and all that, right? If it had been left to the devices of Generation X and the grunge movement, what would have happened is they would have just sat there like being bored and being sad, and then they would have starved to death. So there's two options, and this can move us into our last point, which is we know not to endorse tyranny. We know not to endorse violence. We know not to endorse that type of arbitrary authority. I think we all listeners here know that's a danger. We also need to be careful not to become the Kurt Cobain of the cube survivors, because there is no Kurt Cobain cube survivor because he is not a survivor. And neither is Worth.
Okay, look. At least Kurt Cobain like made a great contribution to culture, and then
He did.
He pieced out. Okay, like
Kurt
Worth,
Cobain. He did. He
my
pulled a Kurt
band.
Cobain.
Worth contributed the design of the cube, which is part of the problem, right? Like there's this idea presented with his character of guilt. And it's so interesting for it to play out in this like Generation X, like younger male character, because you see that same thing now, where I think I read something or whatever that around like people around my generation are so depressed about climate change, so eaten up about their contribution to environmental degradation, that it doesn't actually inspire action or innovation to face that problem. Instead, it is such a level of almost this kind of self-indulgent, humans are bad, this is our fault mindset, that they just give up. They're already expecting the end of the world. They're already expecting everything to go to shit and that nothing will be solved. So there's actually this like defeatist attitude towards the problem, which is what you see in this character. From the beginning, he knows that he contributed in a way to this problem. And because of that, he feels, like guilty and has no desire to, it's like he doesn't see himself as, as worthy of, being able to do anything, being able to contribute anything good after having done nothing with my life. Like that's one of the lines he says, I have nothing to live for out there. At the end, when she's like, you got to get out, you can get out. He's like, I have nothing out there. So you have this character that like has no faith in his ability to contribute anything good to the problem. And he kind of just goes around the whole time. But when you start to see this character change is so crazy to me. And this is why I think this is a movie that is it's a trad classic. It's a trad film. This whiny, nihilistic, disaffected, kind of useless figure starts to take on a role of contribution, starts to make an effort to do things that are good for someone else, for a woman, for the young woman in the film. So it's at the point when he sees the tyrannical guy beating her up and basically, I don't know what he was going to do. He's like going to throw her in one of the trap rooms or something, or like rape her or something. But he was like, whatever, oppressing her. When he sees that happening, that's where he stands up to this tyrannical leader. Now, of course, he gets the shit beat out of him because he doesn't have the same physical capacity as this tyrannical leader figure who his claim to power is simply physical prowess. So you have the character get the shit beat out of him, but he gets that for something meaningful, right? He was protecting someone vulnerable. He was protecting a woman. But the thing that develops towards the end of the film is like this little family. At the very end of the film is Worth trying to move forward, and like he actually commits to bringing the handicapped character along, even though he's like, difficult and like, oh, he's gotten stuck in another room or whatever. They go back, they're like, we'll get him. And this kind of is like the innocent, right? He's like a childlike figure. So you have this, a woman and the child. And now Worth has his role, has a purpose, and actually at the very end has this honorable last act, which is to sacrifice himself to redeem the death of the woman and to allow for the innocent to escape. This is like, what? When I saw that play out in the movie, I was like, I can't believe it's so like clear but subtle at the same time. I don't think they did that on purpose. That's the kind of storytelling that you do by accident, especially when you make a movie like Cube.
I don't. That's why I suggested Cube, because it's been a long time since I've seen it. I know that it's bad, but I actually think that this type of film it would have worked better almost as a short story or something as a play with.
Yeah.
There's
It's written like a play.
It's a very unbalanced film in that I actually could give enough credit to the person that wrote this. I actually think they may have thought that out. But, they don't have a lot of money, man. They're dealing with actors and actresses that are not top of the line or whatever. Even though, to be fair, well, it's possible to watch it. It's watchable. But yes,
it is.
I don't have anything much to add to that besides, it doesn't work out too well in the end.
No.
So maybe overthrow the tyrant before it gets to that point. That's all I'm trying to say.
And also find a purpose, find something to live for before the only way you can redeem your life is to give it for something in the very last gesture. That was the redeeming act of his entire life, essentially, is to die for something good, which, that's kind of, I guess, the redeeming act of everyone's life. You just don't want to have to actually die, is the thing.
It's a large claim to make at the end of a podcast on Cube. But whatever, if you're comfortable making that claim, feel free. I'm not going down. That's all I'm trying to say. I'm going to end this podcast with saying I'm not going down with Worth, with any of these fools. I'm not going into the cube.
I don't know. You're kind of embodying a little bit of the tyrannical leader energy, and I'm not so sure. You would be one that's like right on the cusp of being like pushing people into the room just to see if they was trapped without, This thing's right. This movie tries to do so much.
So
maybe
he
that's also the problem. Tries to do that ethical question and whatever.
Forget about the ethics for a while. I know about tyranny. I've been reading about Stalin, Lenin. I've been reading about tyrants all my life. So if you want to know where he fucked up as a tyrant, he should have. This is terrible, actually. I think we should just end. The correct tyrant move. Okay, I'm not saying that I would do this. I'm saying that if I were in the cube and I had been foisted upon me to act the tyrant, or if I were advising a tyrant in the cube, he should have publicly executed his enemy. He half killed his enemy. Yeah. He let her slip off the side to know good. To know that's weakness. Mm-hmm. What he needed to do, if he was going to do that, was to make an example of his enemy in the cube.
Do it in the light of day.
And then move on.
Because that...
Again, not...
Yeah, that makes you seem like
not suggesting cube tactics.
No, don't do that. We don't want that. We don't want that. But like, here's the thing,
That's why I say don't go into the cube in the first place.
I don't understand this logic of you. No one walked into the cube in the first place. We're not gonna fight over this. But here's the thing, like I'm listening to the podcast.
Well, Hypercube 2, we'll find out.
With Peterson and what's that guy that wrote the 28 Laws of Power, whatever it is, 27 Laws of Power?
I don't know. 47. Sounds like nonsense.
Robert Greene. Okay. So yeah, he writes this stuff, but it's very interesting because he wrote these books of like laws of power and laws of war or whatever, and kind of like deconstructs makes overt all the strategies and mechanisms that go behind power plays and things like this. And he gets like a lot of flack now because now we're in this like hyper moral cultural age where everybody's pretending that like they're a saint or something. So like to even make overt the fact that people use manipulation tactics and that you should be aware of them is a sin now. And I think that's interesting.
Well, all those people are dead in the cube. I don't know what to tell you. People who think like that are fucking they're cube detritus. They're the first to be cubed. So I don't know. I mean, it's unfortunate that I don't know if people actually really I think that this extremely small minority of people on Twitter that's like things are scary. And
look, these are the people that drive the cultural conversation. They're the big brains at CNN.
They do not
and the
drive
New
my
York
cultural
Times.
conversation.
Your culture
they do not.
Is a
biographies
of
Stalin drive my conversation.
Jesus.
You understand?
Well, this is the thing. I say this. We need to deconstruct this idea of like the tyrannical leader and say like, what would a tyrannical leader do? Because guess what that means? is that you can actually identify it when you see it happening, instead of being like this
Correct.
naive, like, I'm just a good sheep. I would never be able to notice the things that are right before my eyes. That helps no one. Pretending that you don't see the darkness in the world, or rather like that it shouldn't exist, so I refuse to see it, is going to drive you right off a cliff, and you're not going to be able to help all the people around you in the cube because you're too busy living out some fantasy.
I agree. And briefly, what a real tyrant would do is they would execute their enemies publicly, but first they would have worked behind the scenes and beforehand to make sure that person seemed like the enemy of the
Yes,
people. That
exactly.
he would have made her seem like the problem to the rest of the group.
So that
you
the
scapegoat
execution was a solution.
Yes, you scapegoat somebody, and then you get the masses to basically put the power of violence in your hands to make them safe. That's what a real tyrant would have done in the cube. That's not what I would have done in the cube. I would have been extremely peaceful and
Okay. Yeah. Well,
worked together with everyone.
there's different kinds of tyranny, right? Like those are the kind of tyrants that are terrifying. The one that you're describing, because that's actually successful tyranny. Like, it's
Correct.
a
They're
bad
good. They're
goal,
competent.
like, fine, but it's a successful path towards your malicious goal, as opposed to the kind of tyranny you see play out in this character, which is unstable, unthought out, impulsive, and ultimately fails. Well, that's quite enough,
Okay.
I think, of tyranny and the cube. We've given people plenty of time. Stop doing little gestures, because now I just said time.
Lots of murder in the cube
instead
today
of,
we've been talking
the
about.
word that I wanted to say, which is lots of advice and strategies for dealing with the cube that is our lives, the cube that is our civilizations. Do you have something pressing?
1 minute. We need 1 minute. We were going to talk about who would survive the cube, me or you.
It's obviously me. Look at all the things that I've said. I'm so wise about the cube. You've been on the edge all this time. You have this delusion of like, I wouldn't even end up in the cube. That's exactly the kind of person that fails to succeed in the cube, because they won't even entertain the idea that they could end up in the cube.
No, that's a winner's mindset, because I'm not even in the cube.
You can't just will
So I
yourself
don't-
to not
I-
be in the cube.
You can. I did. I just did it publicly. I don't even have to engage in the game of the cube, because I've already won, because I'm not in the cube. So like and subscribe, and leave in the comments if you'd like for us to cover Cube 2 Hypercube, which I'm kind of curious about now.
Yeah,
honestly.
might have to do research.
So, it's spring break here in Florida, and I'm just bringing the knowledge to this. What? This is
reading
how I.
Stalin out in the sunny Florida beach, sitting there with your.
This is how I have fun. I watch
Yeah.
the Cube. I do podcasts in the Cube. I read biographies of Stalin.
Cube. You
That's
live
what
in the Cube.
on the beach.
You're already in the cube. That's why you can't be taken by the cube.
I am beyond the Cube. I am beyond. You don't even. There's a name for it. I don't know, because I'm not a math.
That's Nietzsche's the Lost Book, Beyond the Cube. Beyond cube and evil. All right.
I'm tetrahedron style.
And this is where we end. Okay. Like and subscribe if you would like similar interesting ideas to strategies for getting out of the cube and the psychology of tyranny and all that kind of good stuff. You should also subscribe to my newsletter. It's a surprise newsletter. You never know when it'll come out. It is Spiritual Soap on Substack, so you can subscribe to that. You can subscribe to the Silver Eye Society on YouTube, but you should join as a patron, because for only $2 you get to submit your questions for our AMA, and they get priority consideration, and you get to see the full AMA, where we answer your specific burning questions about how you would get out of specific cube related scenarios and other things.
Don't be there in the first place.
Yeah, well, you just gave away the whole sell. I'm trying to get them to join the AMAs and stuff, and you just told them the answer. There are far more answers on how to get out of the cube. You'll find them in the AMA if you join the Silver Eye Society. So do that, patron. Follow us, all of that. Blah, blah, blah. This is long enough. All right, bye.